Hi folks, HR Funk here, with what in my estimation might just be the perfect .357 Magnum revolver. What I have with me here today is the Smith & Wesson Model 686 Plus mountain gun, and this is a revolver that I have wanted for over 25 years. Now upon hearing that, some of you might be thinking, well gee HR Funk, if you like it that much, why'd you wait so long to get one? The reason is because no one's been making them. Now, no, I did not get into a souped-up DeLorean back in 1998 and travel back to the future of 2025 just so I could discover this revolver and then return home to 1998 and wait for over a quarter of a century for someone to start producing them. That's not the case at all. But during the course of this video, I'll tell you all about the history of the Smith & Wesson mountain guns in general. I'll tell you the story of the .357 Magnum mountain gun in particular. And before it's all done, I'll let you know why I think this might just be the perfect .357 Magnum revolver. Now, for any of you who don't want to hear the story and the history and you're just here for the review, simply fast forward in the video to the point where you see a close-up of this revolver on my bench, and that's where the review proper will begin. But for everyone else, here we go. The history of the Smith & Wesson mountain guns goes all the way back to the late 1980s when the company produced the first models to bear that name. And in fact, those first models were called the Mountain Revolver, and they were a variant of the company's 4-inch Model 629 built on the large end frame and chambered for the .44 Magnum cartridge. The concept behind the mountain gun was essentially to build a large revolver chambered for a powerful cartridge that would be lighter and easier to carry when someone was out walking in the woods or through the fields or in the mountains, hence the name. As I said, the first ones were called the Mountain Revolver. The name Mountain Gun evolved later on, and the mountain guns were never a regular catalog item for Smith & Wesson, but they would produce a special run every so often, and the 629 mountain gun was run several times in the late 80s and into the 1990s, and eventually the mountain gun received other chamberings. There were some 45 Colt mountain guns, there were 41 Magnum mountain guns, there was a 45 ACP mountain gun, but the thing they all shared in common was the fact that they were built on the large end frame. Now, before anyone starts typing away on your keyboard, I realize the stainless steel version of the revolvers are not designated as end frames. But if I start talking about F frames and H frames and E frames, there are a lot of people who aren't going to know what I'm talking about. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use the much more common terminology and refer to the large frame as the N frame and the medium frame as the K frame and the medium large as the L frame. Now, as I said, the mountain guns were devised in the late 1980s, and that was before the time when materials such as scandium or titanium became common in handgun manufacturing, and the aluminum alloy that was used in those days for handguns would not have lasted long when combined with powerful cartridges such as the .44 Magnum. So really the only way to reduce weight from the revolver in those days was to reduce the amount of steel, or in this case stainless steel, that was used in their construction. The biggest place where that steel was removed from the mountain guns was in the barrel. And this is what really distinguishes the mountain guns in terms of their appearance from any of the other handguns in the Smith & Wesson line. It is this gracefully contoured barrel, and I'm not sure if you can even see it well. I'm going to move this and refocus the camera to try to give you a better look at it. You can see near the frame where the pressure from the cartridge is at its highest. The barrel is also at its thickest, and then it tapers very gracefully all the way down to the muzzle where it's relatively thin. The net result of all this is a reduction in weight of several ounces, and also I think visually perhaps the best looking of all the Smith & Wesson revolvers. I just love that contour. I think it looks fantastic. This, by the way, is my Model 629 mountain gun chambered for the .44 Magnum cartridge. I did purchase this back during the 1990s. And eventually the mountain guns were brought out in a carbon steel blued version, so you might see some of those out there. And as I said, they were run off and on during the course of the 1990s, so the end frame versions of the mountain guns are not extremely rare, but now let's switch gears and talk about the .357 Magnum version. In 1998, Smith & Wesson came out with the only version of the mountain gun ever to be built on something other than the large N frame, and specifically it was built on the medium-large L frame. That revolver was chambered for the 357 Magnum cartridge, and it was built with a 7-shot cylinder, hence the 686 Plus designation. And what I did not know at the time is that model was a stocking dealer special. And there were only about 2,000 of those made, and when those were gone, they were gone. Back at that time in 1998, I saw exactly one of those revolvers at a local retailer. Now keep in mind, this was before the days of online retailers, so I couldn't just sit down at the computer and try to punch up 357, 686 Plus mountain gun and find one for sale somewhere. So we really had to rely on our local firearms retailers for anything we purchased in those days. And when I saw that one at a local retailer, I handled it and I instantly fell in love with that revolver. But on that particular day, I just did not have the extra funds to take that revolver home with me. I wasn't worried because I knew the mountain guns, as I said, were run periodically, and I thought I would just purchase one later on when I did have the disposable income to do so. I did not know that I was going to be waiting for over a quarter of a century before I could actually accomplish that. Now let's flash forward to 2025, and I've got to talk about Lipsey's Firearms Wholesalers. And specifically, I have to mention Jason Klossner from Lipsey's because I think he actually loves the mountain guns as much as I do. Somehow, he and the other folks from Lipsey's successfully lobbied Smith & Wesson to bring back not only the 629 mountain gun, but also the Model 686 Plus mountain gun that had not been seen for over 25 years. I knew nothing about that until I was walking through this year's SHOT Show, and when I walked through the Lipsey's display, I instantly saw the mountain guns on the shelf, and my eyes fell on the 686 Plus version of the mountain gun, and I was stunned. That led to a lengthy conversation between me and Jason, and he told me some of the things that are a little bit different about this newer mountain gun as opposed to those that were built back in 1998. And throughout the course of this video, I'm going to tell you about those differences. I'll tell you about the similarities, and as I said, I'll tell you why I think this is the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. We'll start this top-down look at 686 Plus mountain gun with the sights. And the rear sight, as you can see, is Smith & Wesson's micrometer style fully adjustable unit that they've used for a long, long time. And the reason they've used it for a long time is it works very, very well. Now keep in mind, this revolver can accommodate everything from the most lightly loaded .38 special ammunition all the way up to the most heavily loaded 357 Magnum ammunition, and there may need to be some adjustment of the sight depending upon what type of ammunition is being used, and this sight will certainly allow that. The front sight is one of the things that's different about this version of the 686 Plus as opposed to the mountain gun that was made back in 1998, and I much approve of this change. The front sight, as you can see, is a Patridge style post, and inlaid in the front sight is a gold bead. This is an old school method for improving the ability to pick up that front sight, particularly under adverse lighting conditions, because that gold bead will reflect any available light. Now, no, this is not the equivalent to something like tritium inserts under true low light condition, or even something like a fiber optic. It's not going to glow like a fiber optic will in bright sunlight. Even so, it's something I like a lot. It's a classic and classy touch, and I really do like that change that was made at the request of Lipsey's to these revolvers. Also note the grooved top rib on the barrel to cut down on glare while you're looking at those sights. And if you look closely, you can see that the rib itself actually tapers as it moves forward toward the muzzle. It is narrower here by the front sight than it is back here by the frame. Once again, every little bit that they could shave off of here to reduce weight was removed, and that's another thing that shows some nice attention to detail. Now, as I've said several times at this point, the 686 Plus is built on Smith & Wesson's L frame. What you might not know is the L frame was developed circa 1980 specifically to withstand a lifetime of full power 357 Magnum ammunition. Prior to that, the K-frame revolvers had been used, and as much as I love my K-frame Magnums, some of them came up a little light in the durability department when subjected to a steady diet of full power 357s. The only other option in those days was to go to the N frame, and the N frame is built like a tank, and it will certainly last a lifetime with full power ammo, but it was much bigger and heavier to carry. One of the interesting dichotomies in the shooting world is people who compete with firearms always want them to be heavier. Heavier firearms recoil less, they're easier to control, they're easier to get faster follow-up shots on target, and they hang a little more steadily when they're being fired. People who live with firearms and work with firearms, on the other hand, always want them to be lighter because they carry them far more often than they are shooting them, and the less weight they have to lug around during the course of a long day, the happier they are. So as much as some folks like law enforcement officers loved the K-frames because they were light and easy to carry, departments weren't crazy about having to replace them periodically when they started training and doing all of their shooting with full power 357 Magnum ammunition. Hence the dawn of the L frame, and as I said, it is a medium-large frame that was meant to withstand a lifetime of service with full power ammunition. By the way, these are the first couple of reasons that I believe the 686 Plus mountain gun is the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. First off, it is built with a frame that is intended to last a lifetime with full power 357 Magnum ammunition. In fact, the revolver and the frame will probably outlast anyone who purchases one. But also, they are built to be light and easy to carry with this contoured lightweight barrel. I'm going to try to show you another strengthening enhancement that was made to the 2025 mountain guns over and above the standard production 686 Plus revolvers. This particular revolver dates from the late 1990s. This might have been manufactured in 1998. I would have to double check. It has been customized by Magnaport International, but these revolvers also were intended to stand up to a lifetime of full power ammo. And when we look at the forcing cone right here coming through the frame, take note, and I'm going to try to get this bigger so hopefully you can see it easier. Take note of the thickness of the forcing cone around its circumference. And when I bring the mountain gun up in front of the camera, look how much thicker it is in that same area around the circumference of the forcing cone. This is another enhancement, as I said, meant to strengthen the mountain gun over and above the standard 686 revolvers. This is something that Jason mentioned to me when I was at the SHOT Show, and I'm glad that I was able to try to get you an image of this because I think it's significant, and it's another reason I think this is the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. Another thing that I'm glad that they decided to do with the mountain gun was to maintain the ejector rod shroud. This is something that's absent on some Smith & Wesson revolvers like the Model 10. And the extractor rod can be bent, and sometimes it does not take a lot to bend one. So the shroud helps to protect the ejector rod from receiving any sort of a blow that might bend it. And depending upon how badly that rod is bent, it can do everything from degrade the trigger pull for a double action shot all the way up to binding the cylinder and preventing the revolver from operating. So I like that. That's another good feature to protect that part of the mechanism, and it's another reason I think this is the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. By the way, we can notice the barrel stampings there. We do have Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum on the left side and mountain gun on the right side. The mountain gun is laser engraved. I kind of wish it was engraved just like the cartridge designation on this side, but all of the mountain guns were marked this way, so that's just the way they are. As an aesthetic touch, the front face of the cylinder where it meets the side is beveled just to break what would otherwise be a 90-degree angle right there. I think that looks nice. Some people claim that helps with reholstering. Maybe it does. I'm not entirely sure, but I am sure that it looks good. Here's a look at the 7-shot cylinder of the 686 Plus mountain gun. And there are two things about the cylinder that I think contribute to it being, in my estimation, the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. First off, you get an extra round of 357 Magnum ammunition. Who's going to complain about that? But the other thing has to do with the spacing of the cylinder stop notches. You notice they are between the chambers. Normally, on a 6-shot 686, which I happen to have right here, the notches are just above the chambers, making this area between the stop notch, or maybe I should say the bottom of the stop notch, and the chamber wall, the thinnest and weakest point in the cylinder. When the notches are between the chambers, we do not have that weakness, so that again adds to the strength of these revolvers. And again, as I said, that's another one of those things that contributes to it being, at least to me, the perfect 357 Magnum revolver. Another change made to the 2025 version of the 357 Magnum mountain gun has to do with the action components. They are finished with a flash chrome, and if I bring up my 629 mountain gun, you can see that these were color case hardened, and there's nothing wrong with the color case hardening, but the flash chrome parts will slick up quicker as the action is cycled, and even from the factory, this action doesn't feel bad, and it has not been cycled very much. In fact, it feels smoother than this 686 Plus that had an action job performed by Magnaport. Over time, I'm sure that action is just going to get nicer and nicer. Now we can see that this does have the floating firing pin, so Smith & Wesson did not go so far as to return to using the hammer nose that we see on the 629 mountain gun here. Even so, I'm not concerned about that. And notice on this side of the revolver what's not there. This is one of the first new products that Smith & Wesson is producing without the internal lock. There's no keyhole, there's no lock components. They announced several other models earlier this year that they're going to be producing without the internal lock, but the new mountain guns, both the 686 Plus and the 629, do not have the internal lock either. Another change has to do with the cylinder lockup of the 686 Plus mountain gun as opposed to these other revolvers that I've been showing you. If you look at the 629, you can see that the cylinder pin has a locking point at the front of the ejector rod shroud right there. And if I open it up, you can see the locking mechanism a little bit better, and it locks right down into this hole. With the 686 Plus mountain gun, that is not there. There is no locking mechanism and there is no hole. Rather, what we have here is a ball and detent lockup, and this ball locks into, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it where you can see it, a recess here to provide that locking point in the front of the cylinder, and that also is a stronger mechanism and less prone to problems than the older style that was used on this revolver. So yet another enhancement to this revolver and another upgrade in my estimation. The last thing I want to point out about this new iteration of the 686 Plus mountain gun are these grips. These are called bear hug grips, and they are reminiscent of the old Coke bottle style grips that Smith & Wesson used years ago, so called because when you view them from this angle, it kind of looks a little bit like a Coke bottle. It's wide at the bottom, then it narrows, then it gets wider again in the middle, narrows again, and then flares out slightly at the very top. This is a very comfortable grip. It fits the contours of my hand very, very nicely. And according to Jason, these were designed based on a lot of the information they were able to glean from the old-time revolver shooters, the people who lived and worked and fought with revolvers, preferred grips like this, and I can see exactly why. It feels like it locks the revolver in very nicely to my grasp, and I don't expect to have any problems when I start shooting. So let's find out how much weight was saved by that 1980s effort to produce the mountain gun by reducing material from the barrel. We'll compare it first to the 6-shot 686, which comes in at 40 ounces, actually just over 40 ounces, 40.1 ounces. Next up is the 686 Plus, and that shaved off an ounce, or just over an ounce, from the 6-shot version because it has one additional cylinder. So that's coming in at 39 ounces. And the 686 Plus mountain gun is coming in under 35 ounces. So it's a little over 4 ounces lighter than the standard 686 Plus and a little over 5 ounces lighter than the standard 6-shot 686. Let's take a look at the trigger pull on the 686 Plus mountain gun. Now this is a brand new unfired revolver, but it does have those flash chrome parts. First pull is 11 pounds, 4.1 ounces for a double action pull. I'll be interested to see what kind of trigger pull I'm able to get in a few months after I've worked with this. Second pull, 10 pounds, 14.7 ounces, so just under 11 ounces. And the third pull also just under 11 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 ounces. Now let's try the single action pull. Before I do that, I'll show you the average for those double action pulls. It is 11 pounds, 0.6 ounces for the 3-pull average. Now let's try the single action pull. A little higher than I expected, just over 5 pounds, 5 pounds, 1.1 ounces. Second pull, 5 pounds, 5.4 ounces. Pull number 3, 5 pounds, 5.2 ounces for a 3-pull average of 5 pounds, 3.9 ounces, so just over 5 pounds. I expect that is going to improve considerably after I start to shoot this revolver, and I may well give you an update at some point in the future. If you purchase a 686 Plus mountain gun, it comes to you in one of Smith & Wesson's hard plastic lockable cases. It has a federally mandated lock. It has an owner's manual and some other paperwork back in there behind that. It comes with a piece of Smith & Wesson's paper to wrap the revolver in, and that's it. Nothing else comes with it, and I'm perfectly fine with that. For more information on pricing and availability, go by the Lipsey's website. There you'll find the 686 Plus mountain gun, the 629 mountain gun, the other Lipsey's exclusives, and a lot of other firearms that Lipsey's supplies. So that's going to do it for my up-close shop review of the Smith & Wesson Model 686 Plus mountain gun. Now this is part 1 of this review. In part 2, we're going to head off to the range and see how the mountain gun shoots. But for now, if you have any questions or comments about this video, make sure you forward those to me. I also want to say a special thanks to Jason from Lipsey's for sending me the mountain gun for this review. Without his assistance, this video would not be possible. Be sure to stop by my website, check out the news and information page to see all the latest things that are going on with me and the channel, and also go by to the products page because a lot of the products that I've reviewed have links to the manufacturers on that page, and there's information beneath some of those links that'll save you some money if you decide to make a purchase. See you next time, folks, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.